Good evening, everyone.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Looks like we're continuing the Bet Yosef here. So it says, כתוב בגדת השרי בשם אור זרוע, דשאר ליטול מסמך, הסמוך לדפנות. So he says, right, this rabbi, that that which is allowed to take from close to the walls, the extra wood there, דווקא בשלא נתכוון לעשות שהכותל עב. That's only if you didn't intend that the wall should be thick. Then מתכוון לעשותו עב, because if you intended to make it thick, אסור, it's forbidden to take that. ואחי אמינם בירושלמי, that's what's in ירושלמי, ונראה לי דאחד דשמח דדופן, או שזרק על עשה אחר. So it says it says like this, that it seems to me that which we put next to the wall, or you threw on top of the schach, חבילות מקושרות, right, bundled, tied bundles. כיוון דשאר ליטול מהם, since it's allowed to take from them the Dibri Yaakov according to Rabbi Mishum, Delon Batle Legabe Dofen, because they don't get nullified regarding the wall. The Sachach and also the Sachach, who adin the Besuka mitzvah. Same thing also applies, it says, to Sukkah, which is mitzvah. Now Mishar told the Cheman, you also allowed to take from them. Cheman the Lo Batle Legabe Dofen, since they're not nullified regarding the wall, the Sachach Lo and also the Sachach. So therefore, there's no sanctity upon them. Says, however, it's possible that rabbinically they're forbidden. Because the muktzah כמו שעשו היותר על כדי הכשר סוכה. טעם זה כמו שהתבהר בסימן תר"ח. So he says it resembles the case of the where they forbade the overmeasure of the sukkah more than it's necessary because of this reason. Like it's going to be explained in chapter 638. Okay, so then he goes on. But that which he wrote, right, the tour, that if he conditioned, right, to take this from Yom Tov, on Yom Tov, these pieces. So he said it's explained over there that they said that if you made a condition on it, it goes according to the condition. That's only if it fell only. If not so, because otherwise you're demolishing the tent. So he says it applies to me that even though Shaita B'riya, that it was a strong edifice with a strong building, whatever, still the condition does work. Because since he conditioned it לא יקצה דעתי מיניה. So he hasn't removed his mind from it. וכמו שכתבתי בסמוך, like I wrote, it says close by, בשם ארן, name Aran, אפילו לרב יהודה, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, it says, מהנה תנא, the condition does work, בכל מקצה מחמת איסור, when there's מוקצה because of prohibition. לאחר שיעבור זמן איסורו, since the time of the prohibition has passed, after it has passed. בפרק קירה, so it says in this parak in Shabbat Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph, Katav Gamken Dehadi Asikna, he writes there also that which we concluded, the Ner Sheidliku Alav Be'oto Shabbat, the candle that they lit on it on that Shabbat, Asur, it's forbidden, Tafka Shaitat B'Riyal. That's only if it was strong. Mehane Ba Tana, I'm sorry, no, I didn't say it right. Yeah, okay. So, right. The condition does work. The Chibon sheitna aliyah, because since he made a condition, lo aktzedate, he didn't remove his mind from it. You know, k'mosh katavti v'samuch b'shem Aran, like we wrote in the name of the Ran. We already read this already. The afilu the Rabbi Yehuda me'ane tana, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, the condition does work. Bechol muktzeh, every time muktzeh, mechamat isur, because of the prohibition. She'achar she'avor zman isuro, because once the prohibition has passed, right? Once the prohibition has passed. Over there it says in Shabbat, Katav Gamken Deha De Asikna, he writes over there also that which we concluded, the Ner Sheitiku Alav, the Oto Shabbat, that candle that they used it on that Shabbat, Asur Davka B'Shelo Yitna Alav. It's forbidden only when he didn't make a condition. But it's not allowed, but he made a condition. To carry it after it gets extinguished is allowed. Once it goes out. So that even applies to a big candle. That's what the Ramban says. And even though there is one that argues with this, like I wrote, Besiman Reish Ein Tet, in 279, says also in Tosfot Perek Kira, the Besukah Reu'ah, that when it comes to dilapidated sukkah, Tafka Mehane tonight. So then the condition works. According to Ramban, Ran and the Ran, so according to them, it seems like it even works when right, it was a good strong sukkah, right? It wasn't dilapidated. Okay. Interesting. So it goes on. When it comes to, right, we already said that when it comes to the sukkah for Sukkot, then the condition doesn't work. Even if it was right, dilapidated before Yom Tov, and fell on Yom Tov, so that only applies on Sukkot. Why? Because that's the time of the mitzvah of the Sukkah. So he says that's the language of the Braita. That's right. It implies like that. The Tane that teaches Shavim b'Sukkot Achad that were right. That when it comes to the sukkah of the holiday, right, of Sukkot, they all agree that it's forbidden. It's going to be explained in that chapter, right, 638. The siman, right, also in Taf Reish Samech Zayin, right, which is 667. Right, God woman. So the Rif, he says, left out all this discussion, right? Deliberation that we had regarding the Braita. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon, Pasak, because he passed the halachas like Rabbi Shimon, and Muktzim comes to Muktzim. So he says, because of this, the Rambam also left out all this. And he didn't write in the second chapter אלא דברים אלו בלבד. He only left out these things. He only wrote these things. Right? ונוטלים עצים הסמוכים לדפני הסוכה. So he says there, right, that we're allowed to take the wood which is next to the sukkah, the walls, ומסיקים בהם, and we can use them for fire. ונראה מדבריו, it seems like from his words, that ישמעאל דאוקיי מדליקים בסמוך לדפנות. It seems from his words, he says of Shmuel, the words of Shmuel, that he qualifies it regarding the Mishnah that is close to the walls. Let le Rav Menashia deokma bisuriyata. This rabbi doesn't hold by that because he says, right, talking about asuriyata, which means the town Surah. The whole shehu el al aschach chashuv. Whatever is on the schach, it's considered to be kischach like the schach. Pasak kishmuel, pas like Shmuel, a paskins like Shmuel. Aber arif ve'arosh, but the rif and the rosh katvu divrei Shmuel. They wrote the words of Shmuel, but divrei Rav Menashia and also this rabbi. Mishum desvirlo, because they hold the more amar chada or more amar chada the law negates. They hold that these rabbis don't really argue; they're just saying two different things. So he says, but there's a wonder, why did the Rambam leave out this which we learned in Raita? That if he made conditions, goes going to condition. Even Rabbi Yehuda right also like that. Like this rabbi said, so it implies that, right, you have to say, that's like this, that Rabbi Yehuda, they needed to say this because of Rabbi Yehuda. The El Rabbi Shimon, because we were talking about Rabbi Shimon, why do I need to each condition? Even if he didn't make a condition, it's allowed. Okay, good. So, so it's possible that he explains that even according to Rabbi Shimon, right, that it's required that he made a condition. Shaita Bariya, when it was strong, before Yom Tov, the below itna lo share, because if you didn't make a condition, it's not allowed. Unless it's dilapidated. Shaita Bariya, but if it was strong, right? Yom Tov, from for Yom Tov, the below itna lo share. If you didn't make a condition, it's not allowed. Unless it was dilapidated. Od Yom and right before Yom Tov. Kafka, but Rabbi Yehuda afilu itna name lo. It's according to Rabbi Yehuda, even if you made a condition, it doesn't work. The Sabar Rambam, the muktzeh lo mehanetana. Why? Because Rambam holds that when it comes to muktzeh, right, conditions do not work with that. They don't help. They don't make it allowed. They don't make it permitted. Interesting. Okay, so that was a big piece there. And it was chet. This was chet. Okay. Let's go Shulchan Aruch. So it says here, Notlim etzim asmuchim ledofnei sukkah. Right, as we said, you're allowed to take the wood which is close to the walls of the sukkah, and you're allowed to use them for firewood. So, right, to reiterate, right, what's the reason for that? As we learned yesterday and today, that we're talking about where this wood is extra there. It's not really a part of the wall. It's just, for it's a spare wood there, left over, right? Whatever it is, right? and it's not really part of the wall. It's not really interwoven with the with the wall. So therefore, there's no issue of muktzah over there, or also there's no issue of demolishing. So therefore, it's allowed. Okay. So says the Ramah here, the huat din im zarak chabilot al aschach, right? So it's the same thing applies. Also, if he threw some bundles of on top of the schach, they don't really get nullified in the schach. In that Torah sikom mutar litlan misham. So if his intention was to use that for firewood, so he's allowed to take from there. So what's the reason for this? Right, as we mentioned yesterday, schach is not the same thing as the walls. Right, what's the difference? Because the schach is not usually bundled up together. So therefore, if you throw like something which is bundled up there, right, you can see, right, it's recognizable that it's not the same body, right? One is bundled and one is not bundled. So therefore, right, it's not going to it's not going to combine with that to nullify. That's the reason why. Okay, pretty short, right? Bet Yosef was long, but Shulchan Aruch was short. All right. So let's go to Tet. Right, so it says in the Torah like this: Bait she'eno tuach betit, right? If you have a house and it's not plastered, right? It's not lined with plaster. All you have is basically bricks, right? One on top of the other. And it's full of fruits. Right. So in other words, the house is full of fruits. And when Yifchat b'Yom Tov, so it was reduced on Yom Tov. Mutar likach mehem b'makom apechat, right? So you're allowed to take the fruit from there, from the place where it was reduced. So in other words, what are you talking about here? It's talking about that somehow, right, this structure got demolished by itself, right? So there's a hole in the wall. So if that's the case, you're allowed to take, right, the fruits from there, right, and use them. So why would you think you're not allowed to use them? So the answer is because it would be muktzah. Why is it muktzah? Because you had it locked into some kind of a building, right? So you really were not planning to use that stuff. And all of a sudden now, right, it broke down. So now all of a sudden, oh, gee, let me use that, So you may think it's muktzah, right? So comes and tells you it's not considered to be muktzah. But he also points out over here one more thing, right? Which is that we're talking here about a structure which is just, a pile of bricks, right? And no plaster. So what does that mean? That it could easily break down, because it's not really, stuck together as like one unit. That's the reason why it can come apart easily. By the way, it just reminds me of something, you should know that if you ever go to Israel, right, and you visit there, and you go to the Kotel, what you see there is something really amazing, which is that the stones over there are piled up, but they have no plaster whatsoever. So the way the temple was built, was without any plaster whatsoever. But nevertheless, right, it's extremely strong structure. So the question is, right, what holds it together? If there's no plaster, So apparently, right, the architects who built that building, were quite advanced, because what happened was that not only do you have their like stones piled up one on top of the other, but you also have like on the roof, you have like stones which are just like piled up on the roof, like it's a rounded roof, like with a right, and it defies gravity, because the stones don't fall, even though there's no plaster there. So it sort of like defies gravity, like what's going on with that? Yeah. So they had this technology, these architects that built the temple, that they were able to do all these, things without any plaster whatsoever. And nevertheless, right, the structure has held on for 2,000 years. It's incredible. Quite an amazing feat, right? Yeah. So, you guys, you probably know, right? Who built the second temple? This was Hurdus, right? Herod. And he was known to be a great builder, somebody who built a lot. That was like, he was a hobby of his, he liked to build. So apparently, right, not only he liked to build, but the technology that they had was incredibly advanced. Because today we don't find structures like that. Nobody knows how to build like that. It's very strange. I mean, you can say, right, that when it comes to the stones which are like just piled up one on top of the other, so there it's just a sheer weight because the stones are so big. That's what holds them together. The sheer weight holds them together. But when you're talking about like a rounded roof, where it's defying gravity, so there it's just like it's quite a mystery, right? How they did that and why they did that, that's also okay. What can I tell you, right? It's a whole discussion in itself. So that's what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about a structure that has no plaster. It's just a pile of bricks. So it can come apart very easily. Okay. So anyway, right, what is it saying here? That you're allowed to take the fruit that's inside there, right? If it, the building, like, whatever, got a hole inside, whatever, collapsed somewhat, whatever it was. Okay. So let's see what else we got here. ולא שאינו תוח בתית ולא אמינן מוקצין הן. So we don't say that they're muktzah, right? The fruits, as we said. כיוון שאין בפחיתתו אלא איסורי דרבנן. So he says, why? Because the prohibition here is only rabbinical. לא הסח דתא מנהי. So therefore, he doesn't really, right, divert his attention from there. Why is the demolition of this structure rabbinical only? Anybody know why? So the reason is because it's not very strong, right? It's there's no plaster, so it's not really meant to last. So it's not a permanent structure. That's why it's only rabbinical. Okay, very interesting. So that's the story there. But he says, if it was built, like really strong, with plaster and everything, right? That's already a permanent structure. So then even Rabbi Shimon would admit that you're not allowed to take from there, right? That's interesting. Even though it happened by itself. Okay, so that needs some explanation, right? We're going to go to Bet Yosef, try to see a little bit deeper, right? What's going on with this thing? So says Bet Yosef, right? Mishnah beperek kamavi kadayain, right? It's a Mishnah, and right, Betzah, Lamed Aleph Amud Bet, Beit Shehu Male Perot. So it says there, right? If you have a house which is full of fruits, Besatum benifchat, right? So it's like all sealed up, and all of a sudden, right, it got demolished somewhat, right? Got reduced. Natal mimakom pechat. Rabbi Meir Omer Av Pochet B'tchila V'notel. So it's interesting, right? So Rabbi Meir holds over here that you're allowed to even lechatchila, right? To move the bricks and take the fruit. Even actively, you can do this. He says. Gemara Amai. So Gemara asks, right? Why is that? But he's demolishing, right? The tent, right? Amar Shemuel Be'avira delivne. So Rashi is right. Shmuel says it's talking about the airspace of the bricks. So we'll see what that means, right? Now Rashi will explain. First, Rashi explains benifchat me'elav. So right, as we said, it got reduced by itself, right? ונוטל ממקום הפחת, he's taking from the place that got reduced. ולא אמינן מוקצין הם, we don't say that מוקצה, as we said, right? מחמת איסור, because of the prohibition. Then יכול לפחתו ביום טוב, because he's not allowed to reduce that on יום טוב, actively. ואסך דעתם עיניי, so therefore he put it out of his mind. תכיוון דלא הביאה פחתתו איסורה דרבנייתא, so since the reduction is not really right from the Torah, this prohibition, כדי להוקים נעלה באווירה, like we established, right, when it comes to right the livne, we're talking about the airspace of the bricks, not muksem. So therefore it's not muksem. Right. So now we'll see, right? What's the airspace of the bricks? What does that mean? Sidur shel abanim belo tit, right? So as we said, right, we're talking about a structure which has pile of bricks without any plaster. V'chen katav arosh. That's Rosh also says that. That which we said, right, that you can take from the reduction, that's only from the airspace, so he says, right, the reason why it's allowed is because, as we said, the demolition of this structure would be only prohibited from the rabbis. Right? Therefore, it's not called muktzeh. It's not called right. Okay. But he says if it was a strong structure, right, permanent, so then, right, the demolition would be from the Torah. Asu, it's going to be forbidden. Because that fruit is already muktzah, because he wasn't expecting to take it. מחמת איסור, right? אפילו רבי שמעון, שלא שר אלא בסוכה הרעועה שנפלה, that's even according to Rabbi Shimon, who only, right, he only allows when it comes to, right, the sukkah, which is dilapidated, that fell. That's the end of it. But the Rambam says differently, right? Beit shehu male perot, that right, a house which is full of fruits, muchanim, and they're ready to go, right, ready to eat. And ifchat, then it got reduced. Notel makom apechat, so you're allowed to take from the place where it got reduced. Okay, this is a long one. It goes until the end of the chapter. So I doubt we'll finish this today, but we'll see how far we can go. And he's taking from the, as we said, you can take from the place of the reduction. So it's even in a house where it's built permanently, right? It's talking about even that, he says. So he says, it seems like the reason is because, his reason is like this, that since the livnei, that we didn't, we only said that it's talking about the right, temporary structure because of the difficulty was one already there. We can say the Tanakama Maire Bechol Inyan. The first opinion is going according to in every case. So it says, therefore, since we hold like the first opinion, so even if it's a house which is built right permanently, it would be allowed. So in other words, the Rif and the Rambam here is saying, right, they hold the same way. So they're quite lenient, right? Even if it's a permanent structure. So therefore there's a question on the run here. They didn't notice this. And he wrote the language of Rashi, the Tanakama of the first opinion. He said it's only allowed when it comes to right temporary structure. So according to Rif, right, even the permanent structure is allowed. So now if you're going to ask me, right, okay, well, according to Rif and the Rambam, how did they allow, right, to take from the fruits when we're even talking about something which is a permanent building? But wait a second, right? Since it was sealed up before Shabbat, right? And Yom Tov, so they were like muktzah, the fruits, you know. So then how is it allowed to use it on Yom Tov? So Rav Magid answers that. Interesting. Wow. There's an answer for everything. Hashem Rashba, name the Rashba. So it says these things were only said regarding a dilapidated house, which right the people are expecting it to get demolished. The Ramban katav shafilu bari benifchat. So even if it's a strong structure and got diminished, in the daytime mutar. It's allowed. So it says because the fruits are not muktzah. And they're also not a basis for, right? They're not a base for muktzah. Ramagid says Ramagid. So it says the halakha is like the Ramban. He says, "Wow, oh." Also, Ran holds like that. Shkatav divrei Ramban because he only wrote the words of the Ramban. So Mordechai says this parak Eruvin. So it says, but didn't we say, right? We're talking here about the right temporary structure. The hashta leka mishum sitira. So now we don't have the issue of demolishing, right, from the Torah, binyan and building. So he says, but nevertheless, right, how will be allowed to to open it? Isn't he carrying right the stone and the dirt? They're muktzah. So says the Riva, the tiltul muktzah shehu l'tzorech ochel nefesh mutar. Oh, so he says, right, you're allowed to carry muktzah for the sake of consumption. We already saw this before, this idea. One time we saw this. כדי לקחת האוכל נראה ממנהגנו שאנו מסיקים על גבי אפר שהוסק ביום טוב שהוא מוקצה ומטלטלין אותו ולצורך אוכל נפש. Right, so he says, right, that's what we do. לכסות פשטידה, that's the end of it. ויש לי תמוה, so he says there's a wonderment, ואם כן, למה לא התירו לשחוט לכתחילה כדי לכסות אפר? So if that's the case, why did they allow right, to slaughter the chatchila in order to cover the dirt, the ashes? Shulsak b'yom tov, that was the right with using the ashes that was burned on Yom Tov. So it says we need some investigation on that. Katav Rabbeinu Yerucham, says this rabbi, Omed Adam al muktzeh mibe'od yom. Person can stand next to the muktzeh right before the holiday. Ve'omer mikanan till machar, and he can say, I can take from here tomorrow. He designates it. Ve'en tzarich lomar mikan bi'ad kan. Right, you don't have to say from here until there. Yesh berera b'klomar. So he says there's a retroactive decision, right? The machar. Tomorrow, because she told me that when he takes from there tomorrow, retroactively will be decided. That this was his intention. it didn't really record, right, what he's going to take. Perush, right? It's talking about the fruits, shelo nitbashtu, which are not totally ripe, kol tzorkan. V'yesh anashim sheochlin otan, right? And there are some people who eat that, kach, that way. V'yesh shen ochlim, and some don't eat it like that, right? They wait till it gets totally ripe. The hazu, below hazu. So therefore, like they're kind of like in the middle, quasi, right? Quasi ready to eat. So he said, since he said, right, I'm going to take it from here tomorrow. So he revealed, right, that for him it's good enough, right? He likes it. Okay. So he says, I wrote above, כך פשוט, like this, right? מוכח תבצע so it says, right, that I wrote that there's also a source for this in Betzah. Perek HaMevi. כתב כאן, מדתנן פרק המביא. So he says he writes this because we learned in the Mishnah, this Betzah, למד על המדרב. Rabbi Eliezer says, עומד אדם על המוקצה ערב Shabbat. Person can stand next to the muktzah before Shabbat, בשביעית, right, in the seventh year, and say, right, I'm sorry, yeah. And say, I'm going to take from here, tomorrow. The rabbis say, no, he has to also, right, he has to write it. Say, right, he has to, like, not really write it, but he means he has to put like a sign on it, to trace it, right? Say from here to there. So you got to put like an outline, on the size of it. But Rashi says, Erev Shabbat b'shvi'it, right? Then Maser noheg ba. So he says, why are we talking here about the seventh year? Because Maser doesn't apply there. Tithes. Then mechusar ela azmana. So therefore, it's only lacking, designation. That's all you need. Same thing also applies if it was already tied. Right, and could be also the other years of the 7-year cycle. But he says it's talking about the general way. The stam mukse lav meusarhu, because usually, right, mukse is not tied. The Omer says, right, he says, I'm going to take from here tomorrow. So that's good enough. Why? Because there's like retroactive decision. Until he makes he puts a sign on it. The siman the end bira adkan, because there's no retroactive decision. That's the way he holds. Okay. So he goes on. So this rabbi passed like Rabbi Eliezer. And now what she said, right, that this is talking about fruits that didn't get ripe, closer all the way, closer come. That's what it says in the in this parak, right? In Bitzah. If he was eating, right, grapes, so he got some left over, and he put them on the roof, right? He wants to dry them, right, to make raisins. The tanim, right? Also with right when it comes to figs, right? Same thing. He took them up to the roof. Right? So you see from there, right? The grogrot are dried figs, right? So you shouldn't eat them until he, right, designates them before Yom Tov. Right? Same thing also with aparsakin, right? Which is like peaches, right? The chavushin, right? And all the other types of fruits, right? Chavushin is like I forgot the English name for that. I'll tell you, right? Maybe you can tell me the English name, right? It's like it looks like an apple, but it's harder, and it takes like a few hours to cook it. It's very hard. You got to cook it before you eat it. It looks like an apple. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, whatever. Also, all types of other fruits, he says. If they're fitting to eat, so then why do we need to designate them? If they're not fitting, lo azminu, may have it. Ki azminu, may have it. If you designate them, what does it help you? So he says, oh yeah, now I got the name. Quince. They're quinces. Okay, good. Okay, so anyway, right, it says, so the conclusion is that what are we talking about? But they're like kind of fitting but not fitting, right? There are some people who eat that stuff. And there are people who don't eat it. So if he designates it, he reveals his intention, right? That he wants to eat it. But if he didn't designate it, or look at that, then reveals his intention. Okay. So let me just see how much we got to go here. It'll take about maybe 5-10 minutes. You want to go? You want to finish this?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have one volunteer that stepped forward. There you go. Okay, that's good. Let's go on. So it says, right? So it says, "Umiu da tosot katfu the shapir ate Rabbi Eliezer kibet shemai." So it says tosot, right? It really Rabbi Eliezer can be like bet shemai. Then muktzah de bare chaim adif. So it says because right muktzah of living things is preferred. Machmirin tefei. We're more stringent about that. The shapir atu chachamim kibet Hillel. So chachamim can be like bet Hillel. The shani hacha de aksia be'adaim. Because here it's different. Why? Because he actually right he pushed it out, from usage, actively. So since that's so, kama la ilchata sheken kama la ilchata kachamim. So he says, therefore, halacha kachamim. Damre ad shom. He has to actually, right? He has to actually outline it, right? Mark it. He has to mark that thing. Chen pasak Rambam. Pek bet Yom Tov, right? The Rambam passing like that. Second pek of Yom Tov. Laws of Yom Tov. So he says there's a wonderment here. Im hu mefaresh plukta Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbanan b'yesh bera. Is he saying, right, that the machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan is talking about the issue of retroactive decision? Uposek halakha k'Rabbanan. Paskins halakha z'Rabbanan. Nimtza shehu posek de'en bera b'muktzeh. So it comes out, right, that he paskins that there's no retroactive decision in muktzeh. The Rabbanan, when it comes to Rabbanan, the Anan kaimalan the Rabbanan yesh bera. But we hold not like that, or we hold that there is retroactive decision when it comes to something which is from the rabbis. The Chen Pasak Hu, he also passed like that Zal, Besof Hilchot Eruvin, in the end of Eruvin. The Bedavar Shehu, Midivre Sofrim, Yeshbera. That right, when it comes to something which is rabbinical, there is a retroactive decision. Oh, there you go. So it seems to contradict himself, right, the Rambam here. Katava Kolbo, says Kolbo, Nishala Shela al Mukse Shel Otzar. So it says, right, there was a question given regarding muktzeh, right, of something which is storehouse, kiyotzev and things like this. Im nimlach ala b'yom tov. If he changes mind Yom Tov, right, Rishon, and for the first day of Yom Tov, v'amar harei ani mechino lemachar. And he says, right, I'm designated for tomorrow. So do we allow this, right, to use it tomorrow, right, the next second day of Yom Tov? Kevan, the shtick kedushot, and why? Because they're two different days, right, of sanctity. We're not talking about Rosh Hashanah, right? That's a different story. Ki hechi de sharinan begoy shevi doron, just like we allow, right? When it comes to a goy who brings a present, Israel for the Jew, Yom Tov Rishon, the first day of Yom Tov, the sharinan le b'Yom Tov sheni, and we allow it on the second day. Where does it say that? In Betzah Chavdal Amud Bet. Ve'yeshivu the muktzeh. So they answered that when it comes to muktzeh, they call migzar that there you can decree dilma metaltel b'shavik. Maybe right he'll um, carry it right and leave it. Kigon tarnagolet haomedet begadel betzim. Just like a chicken, right, which is designated for laying eggs. So he said that's what it's fitting for. But for sure it's forbidden, like we said, right? The biyune, like we said regarding the pigeons, shovach of the dovecote. The lo sagi that it's not enough for michan ani notel. Say just I'm going to take from there. The machar ad she'amar zeh v'zeh ani notel. Unless he says I'm taking this one and this one, right? You have to identify the pigeon you're taking. However, when it comes to other muktzeh, he says the likra migzar high gezerah. You cannot make this decree. You're going for instance, when it comes to wood and fruits, shel otzar, right, of storehouses, vaday michze, it definitely is fitting. The mehane behu achana, because there, right, you can do preparation, by designation. The aminan miman afshach, right? We say like because either way, right? Either way. What does it mean either way? One day is Yom Tov, the other one is not, right? We just don't know which one it is, right? We're not sure. We already talked about this before. Tanya b'Tosefta, Zedna Tosefta, and Braita, right? I'm sorry, not a Braita, Tosefta. The Betza, Peg Dalad, fourth parak, Suket Te'anim, right? Veha Te'anim, Mehem Te'anim Mechabadot Temara, Umehem Temara, Ichnisan Letzim, En Ochel Mehem B'Yom Tov, V'Machal Behema, Ochel, right? So he says over there, right? Interesting. That you have some figs. So he says regarding those figs, and there's also right some dates there mixed in with it. So if he put them in, it says with wood, so you cannot eat them on Yom Tov, right? But it says if it's for animal fodder, he's allowed to eat them on Yom Tov. So it depends on what he stored it up for. Interesting. Okay, we're almost finished. Okay. I hope you guys are not getting dizzy. So it says, Katuv be'agot ashiri pek en tzadin, right? It says over there, Goy she'asa minalim b'yom tov. A goy that made shoes on Yom Tov, right? Bestam bimkor, and he wants to sell it, right? Apparently. The whole mishe, whoever wants to buy it. Ba Yehudi acher echad v'yirgil atzlo v'lakcham mechanoto, right? So what about if the Jew comes and takes it, right? Buys it from him on Yom Tov. So took it from the store. There was actually a case like this. Rabbi Yom Tov. So he says this rabbi forbade that. Mishum muktzeh, because it's muktzeh. But Rabbi Eliyahu allowed this. Because he says, right, it was finished, it was done by people. Yom Tov, and you can finish on Yom Tov. Let be mishum muktzeh. There's no muktzeh there. Okay, Mirol Zarua, right from the Or Zarua. Adkan Kvar Netbayar Zeh Besiman Reshnum Bed. This was already explained in a different chapter, right? 252. Pekira, it says in the Shabbat, Memhe Amud Aleph, Maite Hadetanya brings over there Braita. Ochel Betenim, he was eating figs, they were tearing, he left some over. And he put them up to the roof, as we said, right? He wants to make dried figs. Right? Or let's say he's dealing with grapes. He wants to take them up to the roof, right? Whatever's left over, and make them into raisins. So he shouldn't eat that right until he designates it. Same thing also with the other fruits as we said, right? Peaches, quinces, the shakol minei perot, other types of fruits. Yokimna kerabi Yuda. So as we established, we qualified this like Rabbi Yuda. Ve'ochel istichale sakadatach. So you need to teach you about the food. You may have thought to say, kiman amina, the kiman de'achil be'azil, since he's like eating and going, lo lebai lehazmana. So he doesn't really need right designation. Kamashman comes to teach you. Kiman de'ela negag, since he put them onto the roof, asuche asched date. So he removed it from his right mind. Minayu. B'katvu Tosot says Tosot, midanakat ochel b'mukse. Since he's talking about food, which is mukse the dachia bi'adayim, that he pushed it out actively. Mined de'achil be'azil sharele. So therefore, right, if he's just taking from it and eating from it, right, supplying himself from there, then it will be allowed. He says. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the mukse, the lo dachia bi'adayim, kegon gab be'otzav. Because he didn't push it out actively. Katuv be'orchot chaim, doesn't orchot chaim. Tirosh hazav megigit anavim, right? If you have, let's say, some wine, right, grape juice, right, which is dripping out of right from the barrel, right, grapes sheno rashai liyanech kli tachtav. So you're not allowed to put like a utensil under there to gather it, to absorb it, right? Shelo ibatlenu me'echano, because we don't want to nullify it from its usage. Kensat Yaseh, so what should you do? Yaniach sham mitato, so put your bed there, right? We discussed this already one time. Or shulchan or your table there. So that leak will be like something disgusting because it's messing up his bed or his table, right? So then he can put over there some utensil, right, to catch all that dripping, right? In order that it shouldn't become muddy over there. So when he fills up that utensil, he says you shouldn't empty it out to different utensil. So you shouldn't nullify from its usage. So what should you do? Empty it out into the tub, right? Where the fluids dripped out to there. So he says there is one that ruled, right? This rabbi that should put their utensil full of water, right, under the leak, under the dripping, which is dripping from the barrel, because that drip, right, gets nullified as it comes on into the water, which is in the utensil. So he says there's right this ruling is not very reliable. Why? Because it's going to become permitted later on. Right? So therefore, it doesn't get nullified even 1,000. Okay, that's the end of it, right? So who said all this genius stuff? Right? This was the Tosfot. No, Orchot Chaim. Yeah, Orchot Chaim. Okay. All this genius came from him. Okay, beautiful. So let's see Shulchan Aruch and we're done with this chapter, right? I kept you all the way. Okay, good. Brave people, very brave. Right, so all it says here is like this, very short, right? Bit Yosef is very long, Shulchan Aruch is very short. So it says here, Bait Shehum Male Perot, right? A house which is full of fruits, Muchanim, right? They're ready to go, right? Ready to eat. Then it got right. It got reduced. Notel Melkom Pechad, right? You want to take from the place it got reduced. So what do you see from there? Right? It seems like we're here talking about a permanent structure, even. And even that we allow, right? As we said, according to the Rif and the Rambam. That's how it paskins here. Surprise, right? No big surprise over it, right? Okay, so that's the story. So even though the structure is permanent, right? It's not right. It's not without any plaster, right? Whatever. It's not It's not just a pile of bricks. Nevertheless, you're allowed to use it. So what's the reason for that? So let's just look at the Mishnah Berurah for a second. Let's see what he says. We could also look back in the Beit Yosef. But let's try the Mishnah Berurah, right, for size. Let's try it on for size. Right, okay, that we know. Let's see more. So okay, let's right understand this Mishnah Berurah. It's a nice explanation here. So he says the reason why it's allowed, even though you demolished, right? We didn't demolish it, but it got demolished by itself. But nevertheless, right, it's a permanent structure. So how is it allowed? So he says because the muktzah of this fruit is not because of itself. In other words, it in itself, it's ready to go, it's ready to eat. Right? So its nature is not muktzah at all. It's just that something is blocking the way to get there. Right? This permanent structure. So that's the reason why. That's what he says, right? So the prohibition of muktzah is not on the fruits. It's just, there's a barrier there. You got to get through the barrier. That's how the Rif and the Rambam paskin. Okay, very good. So, Bezal Hashem, we'll see you. Chazak Baruch. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and happiness. We'll see you tomorrow. And Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
God bless.